Good afternoon to you. Mark Stout of HurricaneTrack.com here. It's Thursday, the 16th day of December 2021, and it's time for the off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Hard to believe we're almost done with the month of December. We're on the latter half of it now. A couple weeks to go, and then December and the year 2021 come to an end. It's almost Christmas, almost New Year's. Wow, where did the time go? Where did I go? Where have I been? I was on vacation the last week or so, spending time with the family, just in case you were wondering. A few people were emailing me, and they were concerned that I had vanished. It's important to spend time with the family, especially when you travel as much as I do. And I think it's especially important for me coming up because I do believe that the winter off-season period and into next spring, for yours truly and members of my team, I think we're all going to be very, very busy. So that was time well spent with the family. We've got a big family. I got 7 kids and my awesome wife, and we all try to get together when we can collectively. That's harder to do as they get older. For those of you that have children, you know how it is. It gets harder and harder. So it's very important to do that. But I'm back, and it's time to talk about the weather, and we will start off with a look at the tropics. We actually have tropical cyclone stuff, content, whatever, topics to talk about. It's always hurricane season somewhere. And in this case, of course, we're talking about the typhoon over in the Philippines. Rai, or Ray, however you call it. Probably Rai. I don't know. But Odette, that's easier to say. The Philippines area of responsibility, they refer to it as Odette. Here is the past and current and present and future and whatever track. It came from a fairly low latitude. I mean, look, that's 10 degrees north right there. Goodness gracious. And it came from south of 10 north, crossed over portions of the southern third of the Philippines, still moving through there now and creating a lot of flooding and wind and surge in the areas that are surge prone to the onshore flow, the big waves, you name it. A pretty remarkable event for December. This became the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane. It's called a super typhoon at the time, earlier today or last night or whatever, in that part of the world where it was making landfall. And it's a pretty big event. Now, as I'll show you going forward, a couple of interesting things about it. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, a couple of tweets here. This is from Ben Knoll. I think Ben's fiance is from the Philippines, if I am not mistaken. So here's a tweet that Ben was sharing. I got the audio off because it's pretty loud. This is not Ben's video. This is video that he got, and he was sharing it, which is good because Ben has a lot of followers. Good to get this stuff out there from the locals there in the Philippines. I prefer the video to be horizontal, but that's just me. We won't go into that. But good video nonetheless, showing the impacts there to our friends in the Philippines. Here's Ben talking about it. I will put the audio up just for a second.
Into the central Visayas. So Bohol will begin to get impacts then.
So this is about 14 hours ago. But this just shows you Ben was on top of it, talking about it to his global audience. Ben, of course, being in New Zealand. And like I said, I believe his fiance is from the Philippines, so he certainly has an interest in that area of the world, as I guess we all should, because we're all connected one way or the other. And that's what it was looking like with our system. Now, what's interesting about it, let's take this back a little bit. This is the GFS from this morning. Let's go to the present GFS. There we go, 12Z this morning. There it is. And notice as I mouse over this, a great feature from Dr. Cowan on the Tropical Tidbits site that you can mouse over pretty much anything and get more info. And in this case, the latitude and longitude. That was at basically 10 to 11 degrees north latitude. Why is that important? Well, let me just forward this out into time. You see the typhoon there. It goes out and it just kind of heads towards Southeast Asia and then dissipates, just kind of goes away. Why is that important? It's important because it's not at a higher latitude and it does not recurve up here into the westerlies. That does not happen. And why is that important? Because it does not inject that heat and all that energy into the system. It's so far south in latitude, affecting again the southern third of the Philippines, that it can't take that heat and whisk it into the westerlies. And so it's going to have virtually no influence down the road, which is an interesting thing if you follow teleconnections. I think it's interesting because sometimes you do get these big typhoons and you see them get injected into the westerlies, and they can influence the weather because you input all of that mega amount of heat and energy into the westerly wind flow, and that tends to throw things off and create quite a monkey wrench. And in this case, with Rye/Odette, it isn't going to happen. At least it doesn't look that way right now. So just something I wanted to point out, and keeping up with the global news in terms of that part of the world. All right, moving along to this map, a very important map. Why? Well, it shows us our La Nina very prominently here. Look at that huge area of blue in the Pacific, especially along the equatorial region, the La Nina holding on strong. And then in the Atlantic, especially the Gulf, and I say the Atlantic, I mean the Atlantic Basin, which comprises the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the North Atlantic, and north of the equator up here. And all of this area is warmer than average. Now, there has been a noticeable cool down from the Northeast Atlantic southwest into the main development region, but I'm not too concerned one way or the other about that right now. It's the North Atlantic and the Gulf and the Caribbean that are very, very warm compared to average, contrasted with this incredible cold pool in the Pacific. Now, this is very important on a lot of levels here for the current weather and the next few weeks, and then next year's hurricane season. We will watch this. I talk about this often during my weekly updates. How does this progress over the next few months? We'll have to wait and see. We don't know the answer to that yet. We have climate models and other things that give us guidance, but that's down the road several months, and how this ends up will affect next year's hurricane season. But before we get there, between now and next June, next July, next August and September, etc., we have a lot of other weather to deal with. Lower 48 weather, specifically speaking for the United States, and other systems that could affect Europe as these storms go across, maybe even Canada, especially southeast Canada, our friends in British Columbia. There's a lot of different weather patterns that can get influenced by this particular pattern of the significant La Nina and the very warm, especially northwest part of the North Atlantic Basin. This is a very interesting setup as we go forward. It makes things complicated. Let's zoom in a little bit and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. Very, very warm compared to the long-term average. In some cases, there's the loop current sitting right in there. Very large area of warmth relative to average, pretty close to the land mass, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above average. This is also important, and I've been talking about this for weeks and weeks now. We didn't have an active October with hurricane activity, so the Gulf and the Caribbean were not agitated. You didn't take heat out by tropical cyclones cutting through there. We have not had significant fronts dropping south and mixing all of this up. A few cold fronts. It's been cooler, but no big Arctic intrusions coming out of Canada. Let's find our blue color here. No big Arctic air masses dipping down like this with huge longitudinal troughs to mix all of this up. And so the result is this very warm water relative to average, and then you get these cyclones cutting across the country like this, mid-latitude storms, and they pull in that moisture from the very warm Gulf. That does a couple of things. It adds moisture to a warmer atmosphere because of the warmth of the Gulf. It's already warmer, so you're just blowing in warm, moist air. And warm, moist air is buoyant. It lifts very easily. And that allows the storms that are developing to be fueled more, like 93 octane, if I can talk. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have cold, dense air. It's this warm, moist, buoyant air lurking around the Gulf. And the Gulf is a pretty big area. And I've been talking about this. I thought about it. I didn't think it would happen this early, with the big quad state tornado, of course, and what we had yesterday. I figured it'd be more of a spring thing, maybe February and beyond. I know that's not spring yet. But I didn't think it would be as early as December. That was pretty weird. But I think this is a big part of it. The La Nina pattern is also a part of it. Everything's connected there. But that Gulf, I've been harping on it, that the hurricanes didn't take the heat out. And so somebody was going to have to pay. And there you go. We have seen the results of that. Now, what is the cause of this? What's the why behind the why, right? I don't know. I don't know exactly why. And sometimes it's okay to say that. Is it a slower trade winds through here that has allowed the water to stay warm? the lack of hurricanes, the lack of fronts coming down, as I talked about. We didn't have all that cold air blasting across the Gulf, mixing things up. I guess it's a little bit of everything. But the end game, the bottom line, no matter what the reason is, you can see it right there. We have a much warmer, giant body of water right next to North America than we're used to seeing. And in some cases, it is pretty extreme. Let me back out to the bigger map, the larger extent here. And these anomalies up here in the northwest Atlantic, you think the Gulf is warm? Those anomalies there along the north wall of the Gulf Stream and in the Gulf Stream itself, 4 to 5 plus Celsius above the long-term average, 6, 7, 8 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll oftentimes say if you warmed your bathtub a half a degree Celsius, a degree Fahrenheit, whatever, above where it is currently, if you're in the bath, you would hardly notice it. You warm it up 5, 6, 7 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to notice that. And that is a lot of energy in the ocean as trapped energy in the surface of the ocean, waiting for these big temperature contrasts to come along and wind events to come along and lift that energy, wring the moisture out in the form of storms, whether it be the tornadoes and the heavy rain that we've seen in the Midwest, etc., these big severe storms, or eventually the big nor'easters that I think we're going to get because of all that warm water and the eventuality that the jet stream will change, and we're going to get a lot more cold air coming down into the lower 48. During hurricane season, it's the heat in the tropics that bundles and gives us the tropical cyclones. In the off season, in the winter months, etc., it is temperature contrast, cold air and warm air kind of doing battle with each other, what we call baroclinic processes, and those big temperature differences gives you these big storms. But the one common denominator is the warm water. The warmer that water is, the more fuel there is for a lot of reasons. And that is something we need to keep an eye on. Another thing we'll keep an eye on, this. I showed you the anomalies. This is the forecast going forward from the CFS V2 out of the National Weather Service NCEP CPC site. This is going out into the future, all the way out to October, or almost October. Well, what do we see? Well, generally speaking, we'll use yellow again here. This is where we are. This is where we're headed. Still a little bit of a dip in the overall Nino 3.4 temperature, and then it starts to rise. But if you just look closely, a lot of these blue members right here, these are the latest runs. The reds are older runs. And the CFS V2 and some of its ensembles, generally thinking we stay towards La Nina into next year's hurricane season. Hurricane season starts right in here, roughly right in there. That would be about May, June, somewhere around there. And by that time frame, between there and July, still in La Nina threshold, roughly, getting out of La Nina, cool neutral. But even in the heart of hurricane season, the ensemble mean of the CFS showing just slightly warmer than warm neutral. So bottom line, and I've been teasing this before, in early January, I'm going to show you the evidence that those warm neutral years are the ones we really have to be concerned with, that we get more hits. I got to show you the evidence. I can't just say it. I want to show you some past events to kind of prove my point here. The La Nina years, like we saw this year, where it just completely overwhelms the system, I don't know, maybe those aren't as impactful as we once thought. And we know that the strong El Niños also tend to suppress things in the Atlantic. It's kind of that in-between time, slightly cooler, and there is evidence, like I said, I'm going to show you, to slightly warmer than average, that we tend to get a lot more hits along the United States. And I'll show you, I'll talk about it. I'm going to pull up some graphs and some evidence from the past, and I'll do that in early January when we revisit this again. But bottom line, there it is. The La Nina should continue, gradually heading towards a moderation as we get into 2022 and the early months thereof. All right, current conditions, as we say, looking out the window. What do we see late this afternoon? Interesting little buildup of some convective activity in the vicinity of Central America. Nothing to be concerned with, just a few showers and thunderstorms, some convergence where the air is coming together. Luckily, unlike yesterday, no big cyclones over the Midwest, nothing over here in the Ohio Valley. Generally tranquil weather compared to what we have seen over the last week to 10 days, and for the most part it will stay that way. That being said, you do notice a pretty active southern stream coming up here all the way from the Pacific. That's energy, that southern jet stream. Not a lot of polar jet activity, not yet. We'll put an X there. Once you get both of those and they combine, especially if they do so over here, we could get some pretty blockbuster storms. We'll have to just wait and see. Nothing on the horizon just yet, but it's still early. Still early. Going down to the Caribbean for Christmas or anything like that? Nice weather overall. Generally fair skies down here from Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the U.S., British Virgin Islands, and all of the islands of the Eastern Caribbean, Barbados, Guadeloupe, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Bart's. I can't name them all, but you get the idea. It's not bad. Same holds true for the Bahamas as well. And except for Central America, the Caribbean is in pretty good shape, other than that one little area of disturbed weather near Honduras and Nicaragua. All right, finally, for the most part, this is calmer than it was, but we still have a marginal risk. I mean, this is even just this in the month of December is kind of unusual. What we saw yesterday with the moderate risk, and then several days before that, of course, with the terrible tornado outbreak there that we saw ending in Kentucky, just unprecedented for the month of December. It really is. You don't want to use that word, generously. You have to just be very conservative with how you use unprecedented. Those events were unprecedented for the month of December. How high in latitude they were occurring. They weren't down along the Gulf Coast. They were way up there in the northern latitudes, especially yesterday's tornadic storms and the big severe thunderstorm complex that moved through parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. At least today, things are calming down a lot more, but there's still that marginal risk. Generally speaking, a very, very low tornado threat for Arkansas. The wind threat also. I mean, 5% is not zero. So you have to take it seriously and be ready because, it affects you. You have to figure this could impact my house. That's what you have to think of when you look at that. How could this impact me, and how can I at least be on top of it and know what could be heading my way? And that's up to you. That's up to you to decide whether or not you use the tools that are available. I'll show you the general part of it. It's up to you to take it from there, right? And then again, day 2, back towards Texas and parts of Oklahoma. Day 3, more calm, thank goodness, but still just this general pattern of unstable, warm Gulf air kind of hanging around down here because of that anomalously warm Gulf of Mexico. Well, there you go. Still in thunderstorm mode, even though we're headed towards the end of December. That's just crazy. All right, real quick look at the GFS from 12Z today for the lower 48. Just to outline things, there's the great state of Maine, there's Massachusetts down through the Mid-Atlantic, the Carolinas for you, and the Sunshine State where I just was with the family. Around the Gulf Coast, etc., there's the Yucatan and the Baja California to British Columbia. Now you know your geography, generally speaking, right? Should have known it anyway, hopefully. Moving this out into time, luckily, a little bit more of a calmer, I'll just put that ER on there, calmer overall. And no real major cold coming over the next several days. This is 3 days out. This is Sunday and on into Monday morning. No blockbuster storms, just kind of your run-of-the-mill stuff. Now, the GFS and the Euro are picking up on potentially an interesting system getting going in the Northeast Gulf. And the Euro is a little stronger with it. I'll show you a tweet from Andy Hazelton about that in just a moment. And then the pattern looks like it's going to try to change as we get into the latter part of December and going into the first part of next year. I'll just kind of move this on out. You see the storms going across the lower 48, mostly west to east. We don't see any big systems kind of dropping out and then reforming and then cutting up the coast in any major blockbuster events, but it's only a matter of time that that's coming. Here's the tweet. Let me just move this over. That Andy was talking about. Going to be interesting, as he says, to watch this potential system. The Euro with a little bit of a stronger 1,004 millibar low up in the Big Bend area. This is 5,000 foot winds, I do believe. 850 millibars. So kind of windy up there at 5,000 feet. The GFS Not as enthused. It's more diffuse and spread out. So we'll have to wait and see. No, it's not tropical. It's part of this mid-latitude system in the mid parts of the atmosphere, about 18,000 feet up. A little energy up there, cold pool of air. But it's interacting with what? That warm water. I keep coming back to that. Any energy source that comes down here is going to interact with that very warm water, and we're likely to see some pretty significant storm systems develop. Will this be one of those? We'll have to wait and see. You can see some pretty low heights relative to average there, the normalized anomalies. Pretty deep storm tries to develop there. So Andy's talking about that, the Euro has a stronger southern stream wave, maybe severe weather for Florida towards the next few days. We'll have to wait and see. All you people going down to the parks, etc., for Christmas, going to keep an eye on this. GFS, though, says, it's probably going to be weaker. I will address this more on Monday. This is coming up 5 days out, so I'll talk about this on Monday morning. Since I will be around next week, we'll do an update on Monday, all right? One more thing here. Ben Knoll, I mentioned him at the top of the show, or whatever you want to call this. And so we'll end with a tweet from Ben that the Japanese Meteorological Agency, the JMA, has caught on to the negative NAO and the AO, that's the North Atlantic Oscillation and the Arctic Oscillation, and even hints at a positive Pacific, I forgot what the PNA. My fault. I don't remember. That's okay. I don't have to know everything. The positive PNA, the Pacific North, I don't even know what that is. That's okay. The teleconnection should bode. The bottom line is this. I'll try to bail myself out for not knowing what that means by saying that the bottom line is it could bode well for colder air and even snowier weather in the Northeast over time, with an interesting or fun start, depending on how you look at it, to 2022. You know what I'm going to do? Just because I can, I'm just going to look up what PNA stands for while I'm sitting here with you fine folks. If I'm going to screw it up, I'm 51 years old. What does PNA stand for meteorologically? And the answer is the Pacific North American pattern. It's the PNA, Pacific North American. So it's just Pacific North American. That's not easy to remember and commit to memory. Usually it's like PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation. So now you all know. It's Pacific North American. Whatever. It's a teleconnective signal, though. We do know that says, as we get into early next year, look out. We could have some interesting cold weather for portions of the Northeast U.S. And that, my friends, is what we will be keeping an eye on as we go forward. I'm ready to get out there into some winter weather. Whether it be in the Northeast or the Great Plains. We got a lot of people that are helping out with this project all across the country. A lot of amazing things coming up. I am still working on Hurricane Highway Season 2 episodes. I got interviews coming up, continuing along our look back at 2020. Yep, still working on last year. It is hard to do. I'm not complaining, and I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just telling you, man, my plate is full, which is a good thing. That means we're busy and we're getting stuff done. So there you go. Speaking of done, I think we're done for today. All right, let's wrap things up with my goodbye. Have a great rest of your Thursday. As always, thanks for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I'll be back on Monday. I should be anyway. That's the plan. And that is it. I am Mark Sudduth for Hurricane Track. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you again on Monday.